So I want to thank you all for coming to St. Paul and having the symposium here, mainly because I'm very proud of the work that we have done in the human rights area, and to be able to have all of you here and talking about, I looked through the agenda for the 2 days, the topics that you're taking on, the things that you're sharing with each other, the learnings that will happen it's all the topics that we've been wrestling with here in the city. So I work for Mayor Coleman, and I have like less than 20 days left in this job. And I do this a lot. I come and I say, welcome, thanks for coming to St. Paul, come back, spend your money here. And you are my last audience. And so since I have the microphone, I'm gonna take a few minutes. And I promise I won't go over the whole 12 years of Mayor Coleman's term, but I think, we are in the final days literally, of our administration, and so we're having goodbye party after goodbye lunch, after thank you breakfast, and it has been, so it's forced reflection, and it has been a great 12 years with Mayor Coleman and our Human Rights Department that then turned into our Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Department under Director Jesse Kingston. A lot of our great staff are here as well. And I feel like as we have been reflecting over the progress we've made in the city and the experiences we've shared with our residents and our partners in jurisdictions within the state and Minneapolis and the surrounding communities, we've faced tough challenges together. The civil unrest that happened 2 summers ago and was in front of the governor's residence and on 94 in protesting of the killing of Philando Castile was one of the hardest things that I've ever had to professionally work through, but also personally work through as a resident of St. Paul and someone who really had to spend time in our community reckoning with the grief and the trauma of that murder and the resulting police accountability that we worked on. We had other incidents besides that where individuals were arrested while sitting black in our skyways, where our canine unit have bitten African American members of our community. And with each one of those are hard moments and moments of reckoning for our police department and our community and the relationship between them. And our Deputy Director, Jeff Martin, particularly when he was in his role as the chair of the St. Paul NAACP, he was a partner outside of the city pushing us to be better, and now we're grateful that he is inside the city pushing us to be better. But that's how this work goes. It's an inside-outside strategy. You have to have leaders like Mayor Coleman who are open to being pushed. You have to have folks like Jeff and others who are out in the community who are more than willing to push. And so in those moments of crisis, having that inside-outside strategy, having people willing to grapple with those things and be in conversation and relationship was really powerful. I can't say it's done. We got more work to do, and I see some of the topics that you're grappling with will address some of those things. Now we're having a national conversation about sexual harassment. And it is a conversation long overdue and a bar that is newly being set in workplaces for tolerance for behaviors or lack of tolerance for behaviors. And I'm grateful that that conversation is going on. But it's people like you, the professionals in this world, who are going to help set that new bar, set those workplace conduct expectations, push things. I mean, we are in a new day around equity for transgender individuals. And we need to push on that front as well. And so while there are all of these things that are coming at us, we're also making brand new policies and practices around earned sick and safe time, around paid parental leave. And we continue to change our workplaces, we continue to change our communities, we continue to hold ourselves accountable in new and different ways, and we continue to push. And so I'm really grateful that you are here today, that you've taken the time out of whatever job you're doing in all of your different places and committing yourself to 2 days of sharing what you've learned, of learning more, because we can always, you go into conferences and you're like, I've been here, done that. There's always more to learn. There's always more people to connect with and network with, because that's one of the things that I am most grateful for as I end this. I've been with Mayor Coleman for his 3rd term. As I end these 4 years with the city, is that there's no way you can do this work by yourself. You have to have partners. There have to be people that you can turn to in both moments of crisis and moments of innovation. And I have been most grateful for the partnership with the State Human Rights Department and the partnership with Commissioner Kevin Lindsey as we have taken on some of these hard challenges. He is a St. Paul resident also, and we see each other at our kids' sporting events around town, as St. Small is termed correctly. And but in the world of needing to turn to each other to take on hard things and push ourselves to be better, I am grateful to Kevin for his leadership and what he's done at the state and what a partner he's been to Mayor Coleman and myself. So with that, I will now turn it over to Commissioner Lindsey and wish you all a great 2-day symposium. Thank you.
So I still have a few more days beyond 20 in the position. So I feel that this is an opportunity to try and get as much done as possible. I was reminded at a Diversity and Inclusion Council meeting attended by the governor, and he was reflecting on what he wanted to try and do in the last 12 months, and he was telling a story about a politician in New York and that he was at the meeting. And he was saying that the person really looked tired when reflecting on sort of what they wanted to try and do, and then somebody asked that politician, is there anything left in the tank? And the person's eyes, according to the governor, popped open, and he said, of course there's things that are left in the tank. And he recited all the things that he wanted to do, and he jumped out of his chair, and he gave this impassioned sort of coach, go get 'em kind of a speech. And the governor sort of turned to us and said, just so that you're all clear, I fully intend to run through the tape until the very last day that I am governor. So for all of the respective commissioners, I expect you to do the same, is to run through the tape. So with that, let me talk about some of the things which have happened this past year and then set the stage as it relates to what we're going to try and accomplish this year as we intend to run through the tape. The mission of the department is straightforward, is to make Minnesota discrimination free. If you go back into time, 50 years ago, when Governor Levander gave an impassioned speech about creating the Department of Human Rights, he would have talked about challenges which probably feel eerily reminiscent to what we're hearing today, talking about the issue of inequality for individuals on the basis of race and color, opportunities being denied to women, strife which was going across the world in wars, issues concerning the dynamic between police and disenfranchised communities, challenges as it relates to urban-rural divide. I would submit to you that we have come somewhat, but there still is a lot of work which to be done in this respective area. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Department of Human Rights, let me take a quick few minutes just to talk about the Act and its statutory duties. They're pretty straightforward. There are 19 duties that are identified for the Commissioner. 3 are identified as primary duties. The first is to investigate charges of discrimination. The second is to ensure equal employment opportunities exist on state contracts. What that means is the contractors that do work for the state submitting an affirmative action plan, and for the department to ensure that that's fully implemented and that there's also compliance with the Minnesota administrative rules which provide for equal employment opportunity. The third one, using education, conference, conciliation to reduce disparate outcomes, is one which I would say has ebbed and flowed over the course of time for the 50 years with the department. I feel very fortunate to have had time as commissioner to really work on that particular area, and I feel that this is the area which we all probably need to spend more time on to address discrimination and disparate outcomes. Going back to what I said about the respective charges, While it is true that the majority of discrimination charges investigated by the department are employment-related, the jurisdiction of the department is broad, and it covers a wide variety of areas. So as you see, housing, real property, public accommodations, public services, education. If you were to think about it from an analogy standpoint to federal agencies, it would be similar to the Department of Justice investigating issues of discrimination in schools, Department of Justice investigating issues of denial of voting rights, denial of public services by state agencies. It would also cover what goes on within restaurants, hotels, within the space of public accommodation, of being denied rights. It would also cover HUD in its investigation efforts as it relates to discrimination. So again, the work of the department is very broad, and the jurisdiction that we have is very broad, and the work covers a lot of areas. Where do I see some of the work going forward in the area of investigation? So some of you may have been aware that Time Magazine revealed its Person of the Year, and in this case, it was a movement, and the movement being the Silence Breakers. The individual who created the hashtag #MeToo is Tarana Burke, African-American woman, created the hashtag more than a dozen years ago. This is what she was quoted as saying as relates to the Silence Breakers Award being given to the movement. This is just a start. I've been saying from the beginning, it's not just a moment, it's a movement. Now the work really begins. And I think that is really apropos as it relates to what is going on the issue of sexual harassment, is that we are starting to fully address, fully look at, fully examine the denial of opportunities for women, not just simply focusing on sexual assault, sexual harassment, but as it relates to truly creating a situation in which they can feel included in all aspects of our society. For the women in the room, in the last month, I want you to raise your hand if you've ever been in a situation in which you've thought, how should I keep myself safe from assault? For the men in the room, how many of you in the last 30 days have thought about keeping yourself safe from assault? I hope you notice the big difference between the two. And I think it's a small reminder as it relates to how we can be living amongst and aside each other, but feeling very different as it relates to just a very basic human right of feeling safe. So again, let us hope that this is just the beginning of a movement and not just a moment in time. Religious freedom to discriminate. So some of you may be aware that the department, in particular, the Commissioner of Human Rights in his official capacity and the Attorney General in her official capacity were sued for denying individuals religious freedom to discern who they wish not to contract with. In particular, a videographer wished not to be hired to perform videography services for a same-sex union. Now, the Department of Human Rights has been enforcing the Human Rights Act, in particular the sexual orientation provision, since 1991. So this is not something new, and has just simply come to the fore as it relates to the issue of same-sex marriage. And again, going back to what we were saying before, as it relates to public accommodations, the denial of a right to contract from the department's perspective is what this case is really about. At the federal level, there's a case called Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, a somewhat similar case. And in that case, a bakery is taking the position that they are not obligated to provide a wedding cake to a couple for their same-sex union marriage. I think this is probably going to be one of the more seminal cases in discrimination law, probably since Brown versus Board of Education. And I don't really say that lightly, but I do want to really underscore and highlight what I think is the significance of this case. Because if I can make the choice that on the basis of my religious beliefs, that I do not need to contract with the woman who comes into my shop because her hair is not covered, and that violates the tenets of my religious beliefs, or if I can make the decision that I, as a bank officer or as the owner of a bank, that I'm not going to lend money to someone because their beliefs violate my religious beliefs, it becomes almost unenforceable, the dynamic, the relationship in our society for individuals to be able to be gainfully employed and truly fulfill their right to pursue happiness. Again, if we think about from the 60s, individuals seeking to travel through the South, not being able to go into a hotel, not being able to go into a restaurant, or not being able to purchase a home, or not being able to contract on the basis of race. Why wouldn't it be applicable to have that same type of discrimination to occur under the guise of religion? Now, there are several cases in the masterpiece Cake Shop one, and for the telescope case, we won at the district court level. The Eighth Circuit has now accepted that appeal. We'll see if this case, our case, the telescope case, gets joined with the Master Cake Shop case. So that will be a stay-tuned moment. Educational disparities. Some of you may know that the Department of Justice has made a decision in its budget request from the President not to forward additional funding to the Office of Civil Rights, which investigates discrimination cases concerning what goes on in education. And there has been some sense that there is an opportunity and a need for states to fill that vacuum, to ensure discrimination does not occur within educational institutions within states. One of the areas in which the department has been interested in and has been looking at for a bit of time is the issue of suspensions and expulsions within schools. So real briefly, there is information which is forwarded from individual schools to the Department of Education on an annual basis concerning who is suspended or expelled within their schools. We have reviewed data for over the last 5 years. The statistics which are up there are from the last reported period of time. And within that last reported period of time, the 2015-2016 school year, the data for the 2016-2017 school year should be coming out almost at any time now. But for the last one that is public, you'll see that Native American students, African American students are suspended at 10 times and 8 times what their white peers are suspended at, and that we have great disparities as it relates to students with disabilities. There are 29 categories, 29 reasons by which schools can identify why somebody was suspended. The most common category identified by school officials is disorderly, disruptive, and insubordination, in which school officials identify that rationale 37% of the time. Now, this, I think, for the Department of Human Rights is one in which we should carefully examine whether that type of discretion, which is being implemented in making decisions, is leading to disparate or discrimination within our schools as to who is suspended. Age discrimination. When I started as commissioner, there were 5.9 million people in the United States that were over the age of 85. In less than a decade, that number will grow to 19.6 million people in the United States over 85. I give you that statistics or those statistics to illustrate the dramatic shift which is occurring every day within the United States. In the course of all of our lifetimes within this room, 1 in 5 individuals in the United States will be over the age of 65. What does that mean for us? Are we creating opportunities for individuals to be gainfully employed, to pursue what they wish to? One of the areas that impacts that is employment. So the department has been looking at employment application forms as a means to ascertain, to see the depth of age discrimination which might be occurring in the employment marketplace. It seems like a small or sort of trivial aspect, but if you think about it, if you have information before you as an employer, the notion, the idea is that you're going to use that information in making an employment decision as to who to hire. So in this case, the department has become aware that on a lot of the employment applications being submitted by employers and being requested from job applicants, that they are seeking information about the age of applicants. There's probably going to be more work again for the department in the upcoming year in that space. In 1996, the Office of Legislative Auditor issued a report, and within that report, it identified that the department had 56 employees. Today, the department has less than 43 employees. I give you this to frame this conversation as it relates to contract compliance. In 1996, the OLA reported that the department had insufficient resources to be able to audit state contractors. In the last 18 months, the department has audited more than 600 contractors. So kudos to the folks within the Contract Compliance Department. See Peter in the back as well, our general counsel. A huge effort being undertaken to be able to do auditing at the department's level. Why is it important for you to be aware of what we're doing within that space? Because it creates an opportunity for us to identify career pathways within high schools, colleges, workforce providers. The department issues more than 2,000 workforce certificates to contractors, and it goes from the top of the state to the bottom of the state. And if we're able to identify their strategies for recruiting and who they are connecting with, that is information which is helpful to colleges and universities, workforce providers, and to DEED to jumpstart partnerships to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to work for state contractors. In the report, Building an Inclusive Minnesota, high-level things for you. A third of the CEOs that we audited don't talk about inclusiveness. They don't talk about providing equal employment opportunities. So again, glass half empty, a third do not. Glass half full, more than 2/3 do. Internships and apprenticeships, great that 75% of those companies actually have an internship or apprenticeship program. The challenge, however, is that 25% of those that have written it down actually haven't taken any steps to implement it. So again, are there some missing opportunities? Are there some things that we can do to, again, ensure equal employment opportunities for all? The Minnesota rules talk about all contractors should contact the Department of Employment and Economic Development to get information about hiring people with disabilities. More than 70% of the employers were unaware of that particular rule. Just uplifting that and asking that question, it was amazing how much goodwill how much interest there was by employers for that resource with Indeed. There are letters that have been sent to us where those contractors have gone above and beyond just simply contacting Indeed to create opportunities for hiring people with disabilities. So again, just the opportunity to raise awareness can have a positive impact. Some of you are aware that in the space of workforce goals, the department has the ability to increase goals for construction. So in 2012, we adjusted workforce participation goals for people of color. In 2017, we increased workforce participation goals for women throughout the entire state. So for the very first time, we see workforce participation goals in the area of construction for women beyond the 6% range. On the state capitol, we saw workforce participation for women approach 20%. On the U.S. Bank Stadium, it came close to 10%. I will tell you, as commissioner, when I first started, we saw workforce participation on large construction projects hovering around 3.5% or 4%. I hope and encourage you to, if you're in this field, to sit in on a seminar presentation where we have Harry Melander from the building trades, we have Krista Seberg from the construction industry side, and Leah Hargett from Thor Construction, talking about the collaboration, the partnership, which has really created opportunities for women in the construction field. And I would submit that those learnings, those opportunities in construction could be applied into other areas. Education outreach. Talked about the Know Your Rights campaign within sexual harassment, but we have issued several press releases, have issued various publications on the rights of individuals with disabilities. Again, this had been an area of which there had not been as much work done. It created an opportunity, I think, for the staff to rise to meet the challenge, to get more information out. Our rights screenings. The department partnered with Twin Cities Public Television to produce 3 shows to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Department of Human Rights. The attorney who prosecuted the case of Evelith versus Lois Jensen versus Evelith Mining, which was the first case to recognize a class action for sexual harassment, came from this state, Minnesota, was a charge that was initially filed at the Department of Human Rights, is portrayed in one of the screenings. That look back, look forward as relates to 50 years of where we are in civil rights has been one that's been used by organizations and cities to jumpstart local conversations about how we can work together, how we can partner, how we can collaborate to ensure opportunities for all. Again, we're going to be showing the first of the 3 documentaries during the symposium. And if that's a tool that you think would be helpful to you in your organization or in your community, again, reach out to the department and Kristin from our office for more information. Ban the box. So this is an area the department added as a statutory duty. We have investigated more than 200 violations of ban the box law within the state. The real movement and action I would submit to you, however, has been the partnership with We Are All Criminals. And in that space, it's reminding people of a very simple principle, simple adage, right? There but for the grace of God go I. And in that sense, this is what I mean by that. Most of the individuals who have committed a crime are individuals who are not individuals who cannot be rehabilitated. But often as society, we treat those individuals as individuals who cannot be rehabilitated. How many of us have had the fortune not to have been caught when we might have drank an alcoholic beverage before we were 21? How many of us have made what my grandfather would say is a dumb, knuckleheaded decision? How many of us are glad that our parent wasn't always standing right behind us? Right? So to that extent, how do we see these individuals who unfortunately did not have that advantage that we had? Do we cast them to the land of misfit toys, never to be welcomed back in society? Or do we create space and opportunity for them to be employed, for them to secure housing, for them to continue with their education? Great work which has been done by We Are All Criminals, asking those tough questions of us in society. Again, I'd encourage you, if you're interested in this topic, to check out Emily Baxter's presentation. School bullying. So the department has been working alongside, partnering with the Department of Education to address issues around school bullying. I would submit to you that I feel like I've only been able to scratch the surface as it relates to work within school bullying. I do hope, however, to publish more technical guidance. I know for some school officials, they felt that the first technical guidance in partnership with the Department of Education on transgender and gender nonconforming students and bathrooms was probably one guidance too many. Just making sure you're with me. But to that extent, I think that there's really a need to make sure that we have holistic treatment of our students within our schools and that they feel safe and secure in going to class. Emerging entrepreneurism. Dr. King reminded us, what good does it do a person if they have civil rights, if they don't have enough money to actually buy food and something to drink? So to that question, if we're talking about business opportunities, we're talking about employment opportunities, shouldn't this be a focus of the Department of Human Rights? The governor has asked us to participate from time to time in settings to encourage entrepreneurs to expand within Minnesota, to identify strategies which can be incorporated at the city, the county level, and even at the state level to grow those respective businesses. This formally was embedded within statute 2 years ago. So let me stop just for a second as it relates to the statutes. So again, what I had said earlier about the size of the department. The department has less than 45 people, and we're enforcing more of the Human Rights Act than what was implemented back in 1996. And now there's 3 statutory responsibilities and duties which have been added. So you may think that this is sort of a plea as it relates to being self-serving, but I will share with you that I fully do not intend to be the commissioner after November of 2018. So to that extent, I would wish my successor that the legislature and that society would give the department more resources. The department is fully operating on all cylinders and implementing the Human Rights Act. It's auditing more contractors, it's investigating more cases, and it's been given 3 statutory responsibilities, but yet it has less people, fewer people, than it did more than 20 years ago. Tribal consultation policy. The governor has signed an executive order, and in signing the executive order, indicated a commitment to recognize the sovereignty of 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota. This is really tied in close in my mind to this concept of diversity and inclusion for the governor. And by that I mean is sort of recognizing every person having a stake, an opportunity to fully participate in state government. This opportunity of diversity and inclusion, it kind of grew out of an executive order which had been formerly titled the Affirmative Action Executive Order. Affirmative Action Executive Order, pretty narrow as it relates to a statute, 43A. The Diversity and Inclusion Council or Executive Order expands that concept such that we're not just simply talking about compliance with rules, but we're really talking about creating an inclusive environment. Well, how can I make that real to you? I'll again go back to what we started about Me Too. Talking about how men should not sexually harass women is not the same as it relates to creating an environment in which women are included and are supported in the workforce. So too often, from this vantage point, as it relates to creating this space of diversity and inclusion, we have been talking about what we're not going to do, as opposed to what we are proactively going to do to bring people in. I submit to you that this is a fundamental shift. And I'm hoping that the next governor, whoever he or she may be, will adopt this as a framework going forward, and that we're not taking a narrow view as it relates to what government's not going to do, but what is government going to do to be proactive to ensure that everybody has a seat at the table. To that extent, Nick Core is giving a presentation on the work of the department in the area of civic engagement. Within the governor's executive order, it talks about all of the agencies being intentional, being proactive, and ensuring that all communities participate in the development of public policy on the front end. When we had sat down with foundations talking about what we wanted to try and do in the area of civic engagement, all said that this was a very ambitious plan, because civic engagement ideas, strategies had only been, up until this time, attempted at the city or at the county level. No state had really sought to undertake having all of its state agencies be this intentional. Now I'm about ready to turn it over and then allow you to ask questions here before we go. When I started as commissioner, the Twin Cities was kind of reeling as it relates to the issue of unemployment disparities. The second keynote at the symposium is Dr. Algernon Austin. And just before I had started as commissioner, Dr. Austin had published this report about the greatest disparities between whites and African Americans of the major metropolitan cities in the United States. And unfortunately, the Twin Cities was number one on that list. He had also assessed it and did an analysis as relates to Latinos. We weren't number one, but we weren't really where we should be because we were number 5 on that list. And then for Native Americans, he said it was difficult to do a true analysis, apples to apples, because there wasn't enough Native Americans in all 25 metropolitan areas. But the suggestion is that we would have been high again on that list of employment disparities. Now, at the time in which Dr. Austin had come to town, I had just finished reading a book called The Coming Jobs War. It's by the CEO of Gallup, a gentleman by the name of Jim Clifton. And what he had suggested at that time was that what was going on in the world was that there was a war for talent. And that country in the world that actually would look inward and would create opportunities would be the one that would win the next century. And what he was suggesting within the book is that the United States was seeing itself sort of on the decline. It was seeing itself as getting older as a country. But what he suggested, though, is that we failed to recognize that the rest of the world, especially the Eurocentric sort of developed world, was also getting older. So to that extent, Europe, at the time of the publication of the book, actually had a negative birth rate. And at the time in which he wrote the book, the GDP of the United States was still 3 times or 4 times that of China. And they had significant environmental issues. And their transportation infrastructure wasn't as developed as the United States. And he also looked at Japan, and he said, Japan, their immigration system is broken. And while we have problems in the United States, we're far ahead of Japan. Now again, this was 6 years ago when this book was written. So what Clifton suggested is that if we brought some intentionality and fixed our immigration system, if we could figure out how to maintain our competitive advantage with our infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, if we could see the value in all the people and truly create an inclusive environment that all could succeed, we would not just win the next decade, we'd win the next century. So for me, within this department, when we talk about construction goals, or we're talking about diversity and inclusion, we're talking about something much bigger. We're really, truly talking about how we can create a vision, a pathway forward for everyone to succeed in our democratic republic. And how, instead of looking at it as a zero-sum game, a game where everybody can win. What was said in that book 6 years ago is still true today. Now, I do appreciate the fact of the irony that we have a special election in Alabama. But my friends, I submit to you, we can go forward or we can take a step back. I'm so glad you are here today because that tells me that you want to take a step forward. And while there may be some times in which we get disheartened by the rhetoric around us, this too shall pass. And I think if we are so bold to raise our voices, to really seek to participate with folks, we can turn it around for all the cities in Minnesota, the counties, the state of Minnesota, dare I say our country, and be a bright North Star for what can occur within the world. So with that, I thank you and I welcome you to the Human Rights Symposium.